In today's commercial world, I don't think you need a massive amount of gear or a massive crew to impress a client. Although that's required for some shoots and it's impressive in its own way, today we're going to talk about how small crews are producing big results and impressing clients in different ways. If you're new here, my name's Keaton. I am a DP based in Oklahoma. I also developed this app called CineTemp. CineTemp's a quick way to measure the white balance of a room. In firmware 2.0 coming out soon, we'll also be able to calculate the ND of a given scene. Later in this video, we'll also talk about the partial sponsor of this video, which is FrameSet. For our first section, I want to talk about professionalism over size. In my experience, which is about a decade in the industry, clients genuinely care about confidence, communication, and smooth workflows. Through my decade in the industry, I've worked on a variety of different projects in different capacities. I've worked on commercials that had $1 million budget, I've worked on movies, and I've also worked on small commercial sets. I'm a people observer, I like to people watch, and one thing that I've noticed is clients want everybody to have a job. Inherently, when you have a larger job and a larger crew, there's not going to be a job for everybody to do at all times, and so you will have people standing by. And I've been on sets where the crew was maybe a little bit too large for the specific job, and that standing by caught the client's attention, and the client made a note to the producer saying, "Why are these people sitting around?" I think it's important that you scale your crew properly. There's an argument to be made that a high caliber, smaller crew can produce the same looks as a mid-tier talent, larger crew. Of course, you never want to overwork your crew, but you also don't want to have so much crew that there's a lot of standby going on, which catches the attention of the client. A smaller crew can sometimes look more professional and more efficient than a larger crew, which can impress the client in a different way. But to do that, you also need to make smart gear choices. That brings me to point 2. Of course, it's always nice to have the nicest gear and flex the fanciest gear, but I think to the client side, most of the time that doesn't matter as much as just keeping the set running smooth and efficiently. That being said, when I'm working on a set that has a smaller crew, I always like to objectively look at my truck and say what will slow us down and what would make us more efficient for that given shoot, whether it's microphones, wireless systems, monitors, etc. For example, my lighting recipe for these smaller crew shoots tends to change about every 12 to 18 months. I've gone from light banks to softboxes to umbrellas, and currently I'm on a light mat kick, the Godox F600 buy. I'll be putting a video out on that later. But all that being said, I don't think that it's necessarily always about flashing the fanciest gear. It's about controlling your quality of output while also maintaining efficiency and keeping everything running smooth for the client. And all of this comes from the same strain of thought, trying to be efficient and keeping the client's needs and wants at the forefront of your mind. No matter what role you are in the industry, whether you're a PA, a grip, a DP, etc., you need to keep the client's needs and wants at the forefront of your mind whenever you're working on commercial gigs. Which brings me to the next point, anticipating the client's needs. If you've watched my last couple of videos, you know that problem solving is at the core of everything that I preach on in becoming successful in the film industry. But I want to break that down a little bit further. No matter what role you are on the crew, even if you're not a producer, it's important to be budget aware. Showing sensitivity to time and money will always win points, whether it's with the production company or with the client if you're working directly with a company. At the end of the day, the client's there to get an ROI on the advertisement that they're making if you're in the commercial world. That being said, if you're able to suggest efficient solutions or cut non-essential shots or non-essential gear that's stressing the budget, that's always going to help you win points. And in my opinion, a lot of the times that's a little bit easier to do with a smaller crew rather than a larger crew. Going back to the needs of the client, I think a lot of the times they remember a general feeling of a set a lot more than the specifics of the set. That being said, if you've got a crew that's small, tight-knit, and works really well together and has a good energy, that's going to make a longer lasting impact and make a good impression on the client in that way. Next, I want to talk about a tool that I've used on almost every commercial set that I've had since I bought the subscription, and that's FrameSet. FrameSet is my favorite place to find inspiration for projects that I'm working on. I've subscribed to them for a couple years now. They recently reached out to me and asked if they could sponsor a video, and to me it was a perfect fit because I only want to promote brands that I personally use or I think others could find value in. A long time ago, a mentor told me there's no reason to recreate the wheel, and that goes for any advertisement or film as well. As creatives, sometimes we get in a rut and we need to go to places and find inspiration. For me, that place has been FrameSet for a couple of years, and I browse it almost like I would browse a social media. Now, there's options that are similar, but to me, what I liked about FrameSet was the usability and the inclusion of a lot of commercial work, because I primarily do commercial work. As a creative, I find inspiration in a lot of different ways, and I like to work with my hands. I find it in nature, I find it in paintings, but for a lot of the times, I need it to be really accessible, and I need it to be quick and in an organized way that I can save it for later. And FrameSet does that really well. In the new version of FrameSet, you're able to search in full sentences. So a lot of the times, if I just have an idea of something that I want, I just type in that sentence and I get inspiration immediately. Something that I love and has been really beneficial to me is the ability to create and share different folders. I work a lot with different directors, agencies, and production companies, and for me, whenever I'm finding inspiration and I find something that I love, I'll throw it into a folder, and then once I feel like that folder is pretty comprehensive and has a heading, I'll send that on to whoever I'm working with, and then we can dial and refine it in from there. And once the creative is aligned, if I have a small crew, a lot of the times I'll just share this folder with them and I say, hey, this is the general feel that we're going for. So if you see anything that's on set that you feel like we could do better to get it in that direction, please speak up. So that's been a very powerful tool, not only for myself, but also the teams that I work with and the clients that I'm producing for. If you want to try it out, you can type in the code Keaton for 10% off. With a small, high-performing crew, I think a lot of the times you can get a cohesive vibe throughout the set. And with a small crew, a lot of the times you're able to do that. You're able to create a cohesive feeling, and everybody on the crew understands the end goal. And that's the last point I want to talk about, showing the client that you understand the bigger picture. No matter the scale of the project, the client is always impressed when the crew understands the campaign goals, not just the shots at hand, which I think is something that you can accomplish with a smaller crew. Of course, our spots need to look good because that's part of what makes a good campaign, but also understanding that it's moving product, building a brand, or solving a marketing challenge is always really important, and it makes the client feel at ease whenever the crew understands that. That being said, that's something that can be accomplished with a smaller, high-performing team more than it can be accomplished with an even larger team, because sometimes those larger sets you get caught up in the weeds. As I reflect on writing the script for this video, I think the key message and key takeaway is that clients remember and are impressed with crews that are efficient, reliable, and creative, not just the biggest crews. My name's Keaton, I am a filmmaker. I'm sharing my journey and what I've learned along the way. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue growing together, consider subscribing. This is just the beginning of the conversation.